We continue with the last video on control accounts, where we concentrate on control account reconciliations. We noted earlier in the study that if we add up the balances in the receivables and the payables ledger, and they don't agree with the balances as per the receivable ledger control account and the payable ledger control account respectively, an error must have been made. So we need to correct or try and identify this error. So the easiest way to identify the error is to perform a reconciliation between the two accounts. We'll look at an example question. In this example question, you are requested to post the transaction and balance of the receivable ledger control account. By now you should be aware that the receivable ledger control account has got a debit balance being an asset. So we're going to draw a T account and post these entries to the appropriate sides of the receivable ledger control account. Once we've posted these entries, then we'll balance off the receivable ledger. So our T account will look as follows. So that's our T account. We said receivable ledger control account has got a debit balance, so the opening balance will come to the left, 614,000. Then we had credit sales made during the year of 302,600, which also go on the debit side. Then we had a receipt from the customers of 311,000. The receipt will reduce the receivable ledger control account, so that goes on the credit side of the receivable ledger control account. If we are preparing the bank, that will go on the debit side of the bank, but for now concentrate on the receivable ledger account. So the 311 will be a debit on the receivable ledger control account. Move to the next entry. Bad debts were written off. When you're all being owed, it's a debit balance. If you decide to forgive, maybe you've got no choice anyway, your customer, you have to write off that amount to show that your receivables have reduced by the bad debt, which of course is an expense on your side in the income statement. So the bad debts of 32,000 will be debited to the receivable ledger account. Then we have a discount allowed. We've been discussing discounts. We said if you allow a discount, apart from opening a discount allowed debit expense, the discount allowed should also be credited to the receivable ledger account to show that you receive less than what you expect. So the 3,400 be debited, so it will be credited to the receivable ledger contra account. Finally, we have a contra. Earlier we discussed what a contra is. This is an entry which is written off both from the receivable and the payables. So the receivable will be credited with a contra. Then we add both sides to get the side with the highest. We see that the debit side is higher. The total on the debit side is 316,600. So we bring the same 916 rather, not 316. We bring the same 916,600 on both the debit and the credit side. Then we get the difference, so we subtract 916,600 minus 311 minus 3.4 minus 8650 minus 32. That gives us a balance of 561,550, which is our closing balance. So this is the balance that we now need to reconcile. We check for further information that we are given. We are told the receivable ledger has got a list of balances totaling 563,900. So we notice that there is a difference between the receivable ledger control account and the receivable ledger. You've been given the errors which have been identified. Now, before we do the reconciliation, let me just refer you back to the pro forma for reconciliation. That's our pro forma for control account reconciliation. I urge you to memorize it. So that's the one we'll be using in this question. Okay, we can proceed with the question. So having balanced and closed off the receivable ledger control account, and then you do an investigation, you find these errors given. So the first error is that the total on the sales debt book was undercast by 3,600, and the second error is that the credit balance of 450 was included in the list of balances as a debit. The third error is that the customer balance of 2,150 was left out when the receivables ledger list of balances was totaled. So we make the correction for the undercast. Which is that entry there. So if you had undercast, it means you posted a figure which is less. So we correct the undercast by debiting this receivable ledger control account to give us now a balance of 565,150. Then go a step further now to reconcile with reconcile with the receivable ledger. So you've got the balance per list of balances 563,900. Let's look at the individual errors. A credit balance of 450 was included in the list of balances as a debit. So we need first to cancel the debit. We cancel the wrong entry and then pass the correct entry. So meaning the 450 should go in twice. So we need 450 times 2, which is 900. That's the 900 there. So being a credit, it means it's going to reduce our amount on the receivable ledger. As you know, receivable is an asset. The last error, a customer balance of 2,150 was left out, so it was omitted in short, so we bring that one in. So you net the two to give you 2,150. 2,150, when you add it to the list of balances, gives you the balance which you had found earlier in the receivable ledger control account. So you've now balanced, you've reconciled. So that brings us to the end of this session on control accounts. Again, like we noted in the introductory, this is a very important area for the exams. Go through the video at least 3 times, find the question to practice over and over until you are comfortable enough to answer exam questions. Again, this is an area which rarely misses in the exams. So that's the end of our session. Thank you for listening.